All right, we continue with today's top story as John Gruden resigned as head coach of the Raiders in the wake of his racist, misogynistic, and anti-gay emails being exposed during an investigation of the Washington football team. We now welcome in Super Bowl champ Jeff Saturday. Jeff, great to have you with us this morning.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Of course. And we're going to get into a bunch of different angles, but there's something specifically I wanted to talk about with you. I heard you touch on it and Get Up, and I found it fascinating. So obviously you were an executive member of the NFLPA, and you were fighting for player safety, essentially. And then we're seeing in this emails that John Gruden was criticizing that, trying to reduce concussions and protecting players. What was your response to seeing that aspect of these emails?
Yeah, shocked. I mean, just added on to all the other, different areas that were just, atrocious. But the one in particular you're asking me about, Dominique Foxworth and I were actually on Get Up this morning, and he and I were in the trenches together, fighting for player health and safety. And that was my largest charge, in all honesty, as we were trying to negotiate the deal. And that someone who makes his livelihood on the backs of players and the success of players, and that you wouldn't care about the health and safety and the long-term effects after you knew that we had been lied to and information was kept from us for that many years. It was saddening to hear it, because the truth is I learned a lot about business. I learned a lot about people in the negotiations. And when I saw how many people wanted to fight against because we might not get as much practice time, or the game's going to have to change, or whatever excuse anybody gave me, it was almost laughable, Molly, because at the end of the day, our careers are short and there's a lot of life after it. And we've been fortunate, Keyshawn, fortunate players have moved into the media, but that's not the story for everybody. And people have to make what money they've made in the game last for a lifetime. And I know public perception, all those things, but man, health is the most important factor leaving the game. And I told that to players since I was in the game and post game. If you ain't got your health, you don't have anything. I don't care how much money you got in the bank. It doesn't mean a thing. And so that's the thing we wanted to fight for. Just another disappointing to have.
Jeff Saturday, let me get a bit more general here, asking you this question. I know how taken aback I was when I saw the New York Times article last night, right around the time. I saw the article for the first time when Adam Schefter came on with the breaking news about how John Gruden would resign during Monday Night Football. When you first read the article, when you heard the details, can you express what you thought, please?
I was shocked. And they were making fun of me in the meet this morning. We're all in there for Get Up. They were talking about. I was, man. And again, I don't know John Gruden. I mean, other than pleasantries, right? Hello, conversations, brief conversations for an interview type deal. I didn't know him. The only person, in all honesty, that I'd ever heard kind of take shots at John Gruden was Keyshawn. And so, it was kind of. Real, like I had never heard any of those things. And when a guy's around the game, Stephen A., as long as John Gruden has been in the game, whether he was coaching or a part of broadcasting or coaching again, you would think some of those things would have been talked about more or more openly. And I was just like you, man. I was taken aback. I was shocked, because that is just not nothing I had ever heard about John Gruden as a person ever aligned with that. And so I was like you. I was astounded by the information and taken aback and again, appalled like everybody else. But the shock is what hit me first, just because, again, this guy's face has been attached to the NFL for so many years. The little Chucky face. I mean, think of all the fun that people have had at his expense, with the intensity that he's had for our game. So I was surprised as well.
No, you know what, Jeff? You're right as far as knowing some of the things that's in those emails. That it took me by surprise. But his behavior in being like this used car salesman is what I always knew him as. You say as a face of the game, the Chucky, all that. He played into that character in that role. That was who John was. And so when I look back at my playing days with him, or even after my playing days, I certainly saw a guy that was not true to his core values that he was something different. I just didn't know that the different would be what he described in those emails. That's what I did not know.
And Keyshawn, that's a great point. And I will say this, and even as I was thinking about this, when I heard you guys talking in the earlier part of the show, I was fortunate. Like I had Jim Moore as my first coach. I had Tony Dungy, and then I had Jim Caldwell, all with the Colts organization. That's the majority. I had 1 year in Green Bay with Mike McCarthy, but who those coaches were was who they were, right? I mean, just my experience in the locker room, I had never seen kind of what you're describing, Keyshawn, like what those guys, you may like agree or disagree with them, but when you stood there, they stood for what they believed, their convictions and those kind of things. So I never saw, kind of that duplicity that you say you saw there, because my experience was just different with the men that I played for.
Yes.
Of course. I mean, Tony Dungy, talk about salt of the earth. Stephen A., I want to come to you on this one. Do you think the NFL has a culture problem?
Hell yes, I do. I don't think there's any question about that. And I think, unfortunately, this is evidence of that. Let me be very, very clear, and I'm so glad that Keyshawn and Jeff are here when I say this. This is a grenade that has been dropped on the NFL, and an implosion is about to take place. Because understand that what John Gruden did. John Gruden, again, offended blacks, offended the gay community, offended women. When you look at it from that perspective, okay, and then you take into account the things that have been said about the NFL, particularly at a time where you have to juxtapose that to the NBA. Understand what the NBA is. The NBA has successfully gone about the business of being a global brand. The NBA has been proactive and is known for being proactive in a lot of it. It's not reactionary. They are proactive. And so as a result, when you got guys that don't get to hide behind helmets and shoulder pads and what have you, right? Or owners that don't get to hide behind the commissioner. Because even though you'll hear Adam Silver speaking, 9 times out of 10, you're going to see the owner speaking. Mark Cuban in Dallas gets into the situation. Mark Cuban's on the air. Okay? It doesn't matter who it is. So when you look at it from that perspective and you understand what the NBA has shown you in terms of being proactive in addressing and attacking issues with fervor and assisting with the players and appearing more, significantly more, as a partnership than the NFL does. And then you juxtapose that to the NFL, which has a hard salary cap. You got owners, 90% of them you don't see, you don't even know, okay? They use the commissioner to be out front and center where they barely give a quote, outside of Jerry Jones, of course, and Robert Kraft. Yeah. Outside of them, you don't really see owners talking. It's really just Roger Goodell. Now you get into the issue of diversity or lack thereof. There's no minority representation in ownership with the NFL, with the exception of Shad Khan, who's from Pakistan, if I remember correctly. Yeah. And so as a result of that, when you take that into consideration, and then you see John Gruden, it reeks of good old boys club.
Well, it's white privilege.
It reeks of white privilege.
Absolutely.
Because and this is what's so painful about it. You look at the emails that they've discovered about John Gruden. It's almost like you seem to have a problem with anything that ain't white. I mean, I'm not saying it literally, but that's how it looks. You got problems with blacks. You got problems with women. You got problem with the gay community. The transgender, everything. You just listen or you read these emails and you're like, damn. And then you're calling the commissioner the P word. You're calling a Democratic vice president the P word. You're just throwing it all out there, okay? I mean, it just reeks of white.
But is it an NFL problem or is it
that's why I said it's a grenade that's been brought, and it's going to implode.
It's not limited to the NFL. It's the United States.
Well, that's why I always said, Jeff, that Coach Gruden was just a bad person. I didn't know all of these things, but his behavior pattern, just at times in the way he dealt with players and dealt with coaches, you can certainly sense that he's not a stand-up guy like most people thought he was. And in the end, this is what you get. And like Stephen A. said, yeah, it is going to affect the National Football League. That's why the National Football League was teed off, because they saw the emails and they, we got to get rid of this. We got to get in front of this right now, because this is not good for our business. And when it's not good for the National Football League's business, you know they're going to react.
And by the way, there were people out there, in the interest of full disclosure, just making sure we put ourselves on Front Street to show the world we don't run from anything. You got a lot of people out there that want to bring up the fact that he wasn't working for an NFL team. He was working for ESPN. He was working for us right here on Monday Night Football. Let me say this. Let me tell folks. Let me put this to rest. I assure you that if this stuff had come out and he was on Monday Night Football, he'd have been off Monday Night Football immediately. There's no way in hell ESPN would have ever tolerated that.
It doesn't matter,
if
though.
ESPN didn't know.
He didn't have to be working for nobody. He could just been at home.
Right.
It doesn't matter. He is in a position. He was in a position of power and leadership today.
I'm just saying you have people that blame. They try to blame employers. That's what I'm
Jeff
saying.
Saturday, I'll give you the last word here.
Well, I was just going to say one of the interesting things for me was the way that this information was found is we're actually doing a court case basically for the Washington football team and the culture of their organization as a whole. That's how all this information was found. So to speak to, do you have a culture issue? I think it's clear and obvious, right? Is that if you're having to research one of your teams, one of the 32, and how they've behaved and how they've conducted business, and then he's a part of these emails, and then to speak to a broader, the broader scope is, and Stephen A. touched on this, and so did Keyshawn, is the black representation in positions of power in the NFL, and whether it's head coaches, whether it's coordinators, whether it's general managers, like you just look around the league. And you ask, how are we going to continue to push? So I think to Stephen A.'s point, there is going to be an implosion, because I can tell you there has to be a lot of emails. I mean, you know what I mean? Like I'm not worried about my email, right? 650,000 emails or whatever are going, but I can guarantee you there's some other people who are very concerned about what is going to be. That's going to be the most interesting, is how the NFL handles the rest of it. Because to be just limited to John Gruden, I would be shocked. I mean, how many names were on the emails and what was being said? I'm not sure if that ever gets, uncovered, or it was just because of John Gruden, because of the New York Times. I don't know how it works, but if you're in the NFL, there's a lot of NFL people who had to be, attached to those emails, and that could be a big issue for the NFL and the Shield.
Yeah, and what happens in darkness always comes to light, sometimes even 10 years later. Jeff Saturday, thank you so much. You'll be back with us in just a bit. Sit tight. This busy First Take rolls on with plenty more reaction to the stunning resignation of Raiders head coach John Gruden. Mina Kimes weighing in shortly. Plus, Lamar Jackson with an epic Monday Night Football performance. Just how far can he take the Ravens this season? Stephen A. and Keyshawn answer that in just a bit. Stay here. It's First Take.